Introduction. India is located in South Asia and covers most of the Indian subcontinent. It is the second most populous country and a democracy with 1,000 million inhabitants and over 100 different languages. India's economy is the third largest in the world in terms of purchasing power parity. India borders Bangladesh, Myanmar, the People's Republic of China, Bhutan, Nepal, and Pakistan, with Sri Lanka and the Maldives across the Indian Ocean. India's population record in 2021 is 1,355.0 people, and India's population data is updated annually. India's main economic activity are agriculture, mining, and industry. India is also the second largest exporter of rice in the world and a major producer of spice in the world. The Indian mines are oil, coal, zinc, copper, silver, and gold. The COVID-19 curfew in India, which came into effect on March 25, has left more than 120 million unemployed, including more than 18 million who have lost their jobs altogether. An effort to curb the spread of COVID-19 pandemic, sanctions have been imposed on non-essential economic activities in addition to controlling the movement of people from March 25, and the country's economy is declining.
John Maynard Keynes is a British economist that his thoughts were heavily influenced by fiscal policy. His ideas were established in response to the financial crisis, which contradicted conventional economic principles about self-correcting economic shocks. Keynes' thoughts were extremely influential, and they opened the way for the United States New Deal, which also include major infrastructure improvements and social welfare programs. The use of government tax and expenditure policies to impact economic conditions, particularly macroeconomic variables such as consumer demand for goods and services, employment, inflation, and economic growth, which is known as fiscal policy. John Maynard Keynes is the person that argued that the governments might control economic activity and stabilize the financial crisis. During a crisis, the government may use expansionary fiscal policy to boost consumer spending and boost economic growth by decreasing tax rates, and a government may implement contractionary fiscal policy in the face of rising inflation and other expansionary indications. Besides that, unemployment benefits increase in conjunction during a crisis or recession with the number of unemployed, preventing discretionary incomes from dropping as much as they would otherwise. In most cases, this scenario results in an increase in government spending and a reduction in collecting taxes. Lastly, both of fiscal and also monetary policy were made whether to achieve or maintain full employment and also to fulfill or maintain a high rate of economic growth and also to stabilize the price and also the wage. The economy's performance and growth are driven by aggregate demand or expenditure in Keynesian economics. The private industry elements of aggregate demand, as according to Keynesian economists, are too unpredictable and reliant on mental and also emotional elements to stabilize the economy. In addition, being too overconfident during great times or good times can result or lead to an overheated economy, and also inflation, where is negativity and instability among citizens and merchants can result in economic downturns. But however, as claimed by the Keynesians, the government taxes and expenditure, on the other hand, may be sensibly handled and used to counterbalance the excesses and shortfalls of the private industry consumption and also the capital expenditure in order to sustain the economy. When the private industry expenditure falls, the government have choice to spend more or tax less to raise aggregate demand effectively, and when it is overconfident, which means spending too rapidly on consumption and future growth ventures, the government can reduce the aggregate demand by spending less or taxing more. Fiscal policies that are either expansionary or contractionary, means that the government could produce massive public spending during recessions and surpluses while the economy is rising to assist stabilize the economy.
Monetary policy. Monetary policy is a macroeconomic policy set by the central bank. This involves the management of cash supply and interest rate and may be a demand side policy employed by the government or rustic to realize macroeconomic objectives such as inflation, consumption, growth, and liquidity. Monetary policy has two types, namely contractionary monetary policy and expansionary monetary policy. Contractional monetary policy aims at reducing the rate of monetary expansion to combat inflation. And meanwhile, expansionary monetary policy may be a sort of macroeconomic monetary policy that aims to extend the speed of monetary expansion to stimulate domestic economic process. Monetary policy of the Reserve Bank of India aims to manage the amount of money in order to meet the needs of different economic sectors and to increase the rate of economic growth. And the main goal of monetary policy in India is to maintain price stability. The RBI implements monetary policy through open market operations, bank rate policy, reserve system, credit control policy, moral persuasion, and through many other instruments. Using one of these instruments will lead to changes in interest rate or the money supply in the economy. And monetary policy is often expansionary and contractionary in nature. Increasing the cash supplies and reducing interest rates indicate an expansionary policy. The opposite is contractionary monetary policy. For example, liquidity is important for the economy to drive growth. The policy interest rate required to achieve the inflation target, which is determined by the Monetary Policy Committee.
Unemployment means that someone can and wants to work but cannot find a suitable job. There are four main types of unemployment in an economy, which are frictional unemployment, cyclical unemployment, structural unemployment, and seasonal unemployment. Frictional unemployment occurs when people are between jobs or entering or re-entering the labour market. Some people voluntarily quit their jobs in order to find other suitable employment, such as a better position or higher wages. Cyclical unemployment occurs when there is a shortage of jobs due to a recession in a business cycle or a downswing. Cyclical unemployment is involuntary and continues until the economy comes out of the recession, and recovery from the recession takes several years. Structural unemployment arises due to structural changes in a country's economy. This means that an employee loses his job because that job is no longer part of the economic fabric. Structural unemployment exists because the composition of the workforce is not react quickly to meet changing consumer demands, technological advances, or competition from imported goods. Seasonal unemployment arises due to seasonal fluctuation in the activities of certain industries, which may be caused by climatic changes, changes in terms of fashion trends, or the nature of the industries themselves. For example, a fisherman cannot fish in winter or during the monsoon season. Unemployment in India. India's high unemployment rate is a major problem for the Indian economy, impacting productivity and income per capita, so it can trigger poverty and other social problems. The COVID-19 pandemic that hit the globe has had an enormous impact on the workforce in the Republic of India. In keeping with a recent report by the Centre for Monitoring Indian Economy (CMIE), as several as 21 million jobs were reduced and even lost between April and August 2020. Lost jobs include cross-sector jobs and jobs with specific skills, as well as services, manufacturing and industry, and office jobs. The Centre for Monitoring Indian Economy (CMIE) previously estimated 121.5 million jobs were lost due to the April COVID-19 lockdown. In July, 11 million people lost their jobs, according to the CMIE. Small merchants, street vendors, and day laborers were hardest hit by the April lockdown. The country's unemployment rate hit a record 23.52% in April 2020 and at 24% on May 17, 2020 after the Narendra Modi government announced a nationwide lockdown on March 25 to curb the spread of COVID-19. The average number of unemployed in 2019 to 2020 was 33.3 million. According to the CMIE, the rise in the unemployment rate was due to significant numbers of workers returning to the labour market in search of work. The statistic shows the unemployment rate in India from 1999 to 2020. In 2020, the unemployment rate in India was estimated to be 7.11%, which was at the highest level due to the pandemic. Starting from 2004 to 2008, the rate of unemployment started to decline. This has been clarified by the fall in workforce participation rate because the moderately more youthful populace has decided on getting more education.
Problems of inflation in India. Inflation rate during the 70s and 80s was exceptionally high as compared to the rates of inflation experienced earlier throughout previous times. In India, in the past years 2010 until 2011, 2011 until 2012, and 2012 until 2013, the rate of inflation as recorded by Consumer Price Index or CPI has been double-digit numbers. Even WPI inflation was relatively high before January 2013. That is forcing the Reserve Bank of India to implement a tight monetary policy. In the Indian context, instead of high employment, they use full capacity output, which is the maximum amount of output that can be produced. So to begin with, current core inflation is based on a large number of lags from previous inflation, with weights that drop slowly. This conclusion, they believe, it reflects the gradual adjustment of predicted inflation. Inflation is sensitive to the weight is in the basket of commodities and services, as one might assume.
According to the National Accounts of India, food accounted for 28.5% of total spending in 2017 and 30.38% in 2011. So the equivalent weight of food and beverages in the United States is only 14 until 15%. As a result, India's inflation is more susceptible to food inflation, which explains why the country continues to defy monetary policy. Many episodes of unbalanced price shift distributions in India are caused by changes in food and fuel costs. So many of these industries generate fruits, vegetables, milk, petroleum products, coal, and electric, among other foods and fuels. So the total of their average contribution is 100%. The fact that metals, chemicals, and textiles all contribute significantly to the 10% tail highlights the importance of food and fuel in new light. So there are two series on display. Change in the relative price of food and fuel calculated as average inflation for food and fuel minus WPI inflation, which captures the asymmetry in the distribution of price changes, and change the relative price of food and fuel, which conveys the inconsistency in distribution of price changes. So supply shocks that increase the marginal cost of production became more prominent in causing cost push inflation in the 1970s. So the world oil prices rose sharply in 1973 until 75 and again in 1979 until 80. This is causing severe supply shocks and cost push inflation. Inflation is caused by the significant increase in the price of oil in all oil importing countries. So the rise in oil price also occurred in 1990. So in the 1999 until 2000 and again in 2003 until 2008, which result in rise in rate of inflation in oil importing in India. So India's government spending has been rapidly increasing in recent years. So what's more alarming is that the proportion of non-development spending has risen rapidly, now accounting for about 40% of total government spending. Non-development spending does not produce the tangible goods. Instead, it increases purchasing power, resulting in inflation. So not only do the factors mentioned above on the demand side cause inflation, but they also add fuel to the fire of inflation on the supply side. So most countries' currencies are now flexible, meaning they are influenced by demand for and supply of a currency, and they can appreciate or depreciate monthly in terms of the US dollar. So when the Indian rupee depreciates, for example, it takes more rupees to buy $1 US, making imports more expensive in the rupees. When the Indian rupee depreciates against the US dollar, Indians who import raw materials for industries such as petroleum products, coal, machines, and other equipment, oilseeds, fertilizers, and Indians consumers who import gold, cars, and other final products must pay higher prices in terms of rupees. So this boosts the producers' cost of manufacturing, which in turn boosts the pricing of the final products they produce. So import price shock has caused this inflation. As a result of the rupee's depreciation, cost push inflation occurs, according to Mukherjee. So inflation or rising prices lead to unprofitable investments in gold, jewelry, real estate, and house construction, among other things. So these unproductive types of wealth do not contribute to the economy's productive potential and are therefore useless in terms of economic growth. So inflation may lead to increased investment. Much of it is of a non-productive kind. So in this way, economic surplus are squandered on ineffective investment. So as a result, it is time to take stock of the usual counter-inflationary actions and try to fix the problem at its source. So agricultural production, warehousing, and supply chain management must all be improved in India. So the government must implement new generation reforms as soon as possible in order to provide a single window approval to project in the pipeline, so stimulating domestic manufacturing and so increasing products and services supply. So the revenue shortfall must be brought down to zero and then decrease further.
Unemployment is a global problem that affects developed, developing, and undeveloped countries alike. The most compelling evidence is that even developed countries are struggling with unemployment. Since the pandemic happened, India has been struggling with unemployment. For the last week of May, the predicted job loss may moderate or intensify, but the losses will persist. India will end the month of May with a double-digit unemployment rate and significant job losses. There are a few measures in order to control the unemployment rate. The first method to overcome unemployment is by using the fiscal policy. Fiscal policy refers to the use of government tax collection and expenditure to impact country's economy. Fiscal policy, in simple terms, is an estimate taxation and government spending that impacts the economy. In India, fiscal policy is the guiding force that assists the government in determining how much money it should spend to promote economic activity, that how much revenue it must generate from the system in order to keep the economy functioning smoothly. The government can help decrease the burden of the people by reducing the taxation in the community. Unemployment reduces economic activity and has a negative influence on the federal government's ability to collect revenue. People pay less taxes to the government whenever unemployment is high. Unemployment, on the other hand, means that fewer people have available income to spend on products and services. Consumer spending is low, which makes it more difficult to enterprises to survive and expand, which impact in slowing the growth of economy of a country. One of the keys of fiscal policy is its measures at the government's disposal to reduce unemployment is taxation. Consumers have less discretionary money as a result of high taxes, which means they purchase less. When customers buy less, businesses earn less money and are less inclined to hire new employees or even lay off existing employees to cut costs. Cutting taxes is a typical government strategy for boosting economic growth and lowering unemployment. Tax cut puts more money in customers' hands, which can lead to higher sales, expansion, and hiring for business. Cuts in service taxes, sales taxes, excise taxes, export duties, import duties, wage taxes, or increase in transfer payments like unemployment insurance or welfare benefits would enhance disposable income and thus household purchasing power. Reduced corporation taxes would also boost investment opportunities. As a result, aggregate demand will rise, eliminating the recessionary gap and boosting economic growth and job creation. Another way the government can try to reduce the unemployment rate is to invest on government programs. For instance, the government invests new public works programs such as road or railway infrastructure. It can create jobs, lowering unemployment and increasing disposable income and spending. Workers in the public sector may be able to obtain jobs in the private sector after projects are completed if such programs boost general economic growth. Moreover, the government can increase the salary of civil servants because it will help them in creating more development projects which may reduce unemployment.
Inflation control is critical to the Reserve Bank of India's essential operation. The Reserve Bank of India (RBI) has implemented policies to contain price by lowering or raising interest rate. As a result, it is critical to understand this rate and their impact on inflation. The next method to overcome inflation in India. In recent years, India's money market has seen fundamental change. RBI has taken numerous initiatives to develop the Indian monetary policy. Most central banks utilize high interest rates to combat inflation. A repo is the combination of a cash transaction and a forward contract. When the economy is experiencing excessive inflation, the central bank RBI manage the money supply by raising the repo rate, which leads to fewer borrowings by firms and industry. As a result of this increase, both store of money and investment activity in the economy slowed, which is critical for maintaining a stable inflation rate. At the end of the repo, the bank purchases the security from the RBI at a more excellent price than the price sold it. The term open market operations refers to the central bank sales and purchasing of government securities and bonds. The RBI has the authority to buy or sell government security from or to the general public. To control inflation, the RBI sells securities in the money market and removes surplus liquidity out of the market. In addition, each central bank sells government guarantees to the public via banks to maintain price stability. This means that some of the bank deposits transfers to the major banks' accounts and the creditability of commercial banks reduces. Demand drops when the amount of liquid currency available declines. OMO is one of the quantitative instruments used by the RBI to smooth out liquidity sentences throughout the year and minimize the impact on interest rate and inflation rate trends. When the RBI purchases a government bond on the open market, it is paid for it with a check. Consequently, a stricter monetary policy approach limits inflation, reducing demand and leading to junior inflation. Government utilizes fiscal policy to control inflation in addition to monetary policy. The central and state governments can play a more active role in reducing inflation by enacting new policies or revising existing ones. First and foremost, the fiscal policy advocated by the government should attempt to reduce the fiscal deficits and reduce external borrowing and debt. Together with lowering needless spending on non-development activities, it would be a significant step toward achieving a budget surplus. It should do so that the supply side strengthens to resource allocation and the successful implementation of government programs. Fiscal policy to curb inflation involves taxation, government spending, and public borrowings. Moreover, supply chain must be efficiently and effectively handled to reduce commodity waste caused by inadequate transportation and storage facilities, particularly in the case of perishable goods. The government may also implement some practicisms such as prohibiting importing essential products such as cereals and oils to boost domestic consumption and encourage imports by cutting import charge. A surplus occurs when the government collects more income than it consumes, whereas a deficiency occurs when the government spends more than the taxes and non-taxes. The government will have to borrow money either domestically or internationally to cover the higher costs. Instead, the government might draw on its foreign currency, interchange, stock price, or keep more money. Fiscal policy also contributes to the growth of savings by providing stimulation. In that case, the fiscal policy seeks to alleviate inequality in income and wealth distribution. In a nutshell, to keep inflation under control, there should be a balance of attention paid to both the demand and supply sides, as well as appropriate monetary and fiscal policies. The RBI, on the other hand, may be able to efficiently all operations with additional premium to establish a comprehensive strategy to stabilize the requisite rates of inflation.
Conclusion, the relationship between inflation and employment has traditionally been an inverse correlation. In 1968, Nobel Prize winning economist and chief proponent of monetarism, Milton Friedman, has published a paper entitled The Role of Monetary Policy. In his paper, Friedman claims that in the long run, monetary policy can lower unemployment by increasing the inflation, and Friedman's claim is strongly influenced by classical macroeconomic theory, which believes that the amount of money in an economy, which is money supply, is a nominal variable and cannot influence actual actual variables such as employment or output. And unemployment is a serious issue for any economy. It creates negative effect to unemployment as they are jobless and suffer from worse prospect to seek out new job, and people who are employed feel less secure to stay their jobs in the future. Unemployment affect the economy in ways in which most of the people don't visually see.